It is only in our human nature to have the want and need to protect our friends and family. For the majority of us, the only way of doing so is the control and the use of a firearm. That's what they were put into production for, as a means of protection. Now, what most of us call protection could make this an entirely different conversation. That is why what I'm about to introduce to you today is such a hard topic. I'd like to bring to your attention the illegalization of assault-style weapons. Now, one of the first things we must remember is that this is not a direct violation of the Second Amendment. This is just a way for us to recognize the evolution of firearms themselves, which seem to become more and more dangerous as the years go by. And like all shiny things, we have a hard time controlling our bewilderment when we see something new. The term assault rifle stands for any selective fire rifle that uses a immediate cartridge and a detachable magazine. This style was first introduced in World War II after the Second Amendment. These, I believe, have a danger level far beyond that of handguns and your standard rifle. These are weapons that were designed specifically for mass killings. There's not one singular person who has the need to do that on this soil. And I know there's been attempts at regulation in the past. You have the Federal Firearms Act of 1938, which has somewhat a little bit of control over who couldn't purchase handguns and who could, which was replaced by the Gun Control Act of 1968, which increased the age limit to 21 and placed stricter licensing and regulations on the firearm industry. In 1986, we see the total opposite. They removed so many of their prior restrictions and allowed civilians with the ability to start selling firearms. In 1994, we get the first assault weapons ban, the Violence, Crime Control, and Law Enforcement Act, signed by President Bill Clinton. This had a subsection titled Public Safety and Recreation Firearms Act that lasted roughly 10 years till 2004, with multiple attempts at renewing this failing. This is something that must be overturned just based on the past decade alone. There's been dozens of times where you see dozens dead but only one gunman. That is the biggest threat of assault-style weapons. There's so many attachments for them that they just grow in danger levels. These are the only style of gun that allow people to shoot from such great distances, yet still allow you to move with such precision in tight spaces. The danger levels of keeping these in anyone's hands are astronomical. Now, I know statements like these don't matter much as of now. We have an estimated 40,000 people dead from firearms yearly. But what this will allow us to do is start the process of ending mass shootings. When you think mass shootings, it's the first weapon of choice that comes to mind, even though handguns has just as much, if not more, firing power. It's the handling style and magazine capacity that keep these on a level of their own. The dangers of guns will always exist, but when we speak of gun laws, we're thinking of ways that ultimately end gun violence, not just prevent. This step would by far be the quickest route. I've never encountered a situation where a person should freely walk around with an assault weapon. Doesn't make sense. Not for fear and not for protection. This is a statement type gun. Most of us like them because they're badass, myself included. But that is part of the issue. When we look at gun legislation, that's not usually what Congress is discussing. Normally, you are speaking on expanding background checks, but not every place has a restriction on what can buy or sell firearms. It doesn't make sense to host such events or exchanges without regulating it federally. The manufacturing of guns is supported, so it makes sense to keep an eye over it like the way we do with cars. The fact that these transactions go against the prevention of gun violence is a big reason the sale of assault weapons should be banned. With the private sale of these items and various accessories, like a scope or extended magazine, one could say you aren't protecting the Second Amendment. In order to clean up gun violence, it will be most beneficial to end the sale of these guns as you correct the procedures going into effect for background checks. To ban the sale wouldn't be easy, but to end the types of gatherings I mentioned earlier, as well as ending the repairing and selling of replacement parts, you slowly begin to take out of consumer hands. With that, you allow associations like the NRA to keep guns while decriminalizing them and putting an end to what seems like the most redundant conversation. Even law enforcement gets to keep them. But in the process, the hope is that the very need for such a gun will go away. I mean, technically speaking, owning that is really only for a sport. Realistically speaking, you can never end gun violence. But this hands down is the quickest way to reduce the tragedy and numbers of it. Just 2 days ago, our president made a statement. I don't need to wait another minute, let alone an hour, to take common sense steps that will save lives in the future. It shouldn't be a question.